Mommy, what is political correctness? Dear, that's giving up your own opinion to please an asshole. Walter Cronkite. War itself is, of course, a form of madness. It's hardly a civilized pursuit. It's amazing how we spend so much time inventing devices to kill each other and so little time working on how to achieve peace. The Great Gathering. Justice for our veterans. 29/6/19. Support our Northern Ireland veterans against injustice. Now Green Park, Saturday 29th June 2019, 10 a.m. If this is his life, he is not a pet, he is a prisoner, and you are an asshole. The Friday 13th bomb at Buckingham Palace curiously damages wrought iron gates, but doesn't even break the glass on street lamps. Curiously, also, most of Westminster, Kensington Palace, Buckingham Palace Gardens and Crown Estate properties all escaped the war with minimal or no damage at all. Meanwhile, working class people are terrorised all over London in the Nazi blitzkrieg. 5 million Londoners walk the streets homeless, shell-shocked, wounded and penniless. 2 million Londoners' homes bombed. Not a penny in compensation. History of attacks against other nations. Iran, Basra, Iraq, 1798. USA, well, you can see the list just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. 622,723 children ages 5 and under are on psychiatric drugs in the US, and people are more concerned about the measles. Of course, Big Pharma's making a killing. Literally. Mainstream media confirmed Dalai Lama is a CIA asset. That the Tibetan Dalai Lama is a CIA asset was just a conspiracy theory has now been confirmed as fact by the Los Angeles Times and the agency itself. This brings to question how much of what the media considered as theory now would end up later as a fact. Almost everything. How much of what the media consider as fake news right now would end up later on as the accurate account of an event. In short, what gives them the authority to determine what is factual and truthful when their own journalist standards and ethics include telling their reader mere half-truths for a while, i.e. when it is the best interest of the institutions they are still working with in the interim. The Los Angeles Times reports. Washington. For much of the 1960s, the CIA provided the Tibetan exile movement with $1.7 million a year for operations against China, including an annual subsidy of $180,000 for the Dalai Lama, according to newly released US intelligence documents. The money from the Tibetan and Dalai Lama was part of CIA's worldwide effort during the height of the Cold War to undermine communist governments, particularly in the Soviet Union and China. In fact, the US government committee that approved the Tibetan operation also authorized the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. The documents published last month by the State Department illustrate the historical background of the situation in Tibet today, in which China continues to accuse the Dalai Lama of being an agent of foreign forces seeking to separate Tibet from China. The CIA's program encompassed support of Tibetan guerrillas in Nepal, a covert military training site in Colorado, Tibet House, established to promote Tibetan causes in New York and Geneva, education for Tibetan operatives at Cornell University, and supplies for reconnaissance teams. Supreme Court vaccine ruling. Parents can't sue drug makers for kids' health problems. See, they're above the law. That's why they just bring out new vaccines that are just total poison, because that's their agenda, as we know. Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. The Supreme Court ruled Tuesday that a federal law prohibits lawsuits against drug makers over serious side effects from childhood vaccines. The court voted 6-2 against the parents of a child who sued the drug maker wife in Pennsylvania State Court for the health problems they say their daughter, now 19, suffered from a vaccine she received in infancy. The ruling was stinging a stinging defeat for families dissatisfied with how they had feared before a special no-fault vaccine court. Merck has been accused of committing fraud in its Gardasil vaccine safety trials, putting millions of young girls at risk for ovarian failure or even death. Gardasil is said to protect against cervical cancer, a disease that in the US has a relatively low mortality rate of 1 in 43,478, 2.3% per 100,000. In the Plaintiff's Science Day presentation on Gardasil, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. reveals Merck data showing Gardasil increases the overall risk of death by 370%, risk of autoimmune disease by 2.3%, and risk of serious medical conditions by 50%. Past marketing and advertising events reporting during use of the vaccine post-licensing are listed on the Gardasil vaccine insert and include blood and lymphatic system disorders, pulmonary embolus, pancreatitis, autoimmune disease, anaphylactic shock reaction. Well, it just goes on and on. But as we all know, all vaccines are a depopulation weapon by those that, well, want to depopulate the planet. Epilepsy and Aluminium. There is a long and deep regrettable history of the injections of aluminium salts into brain tissue in animals, including primates, model on human epilepsy. With this in mind, it may be surprising that our recent research is the first to measure and identify aluminium in human epilepsy. We present a case report on another victim on the Camelford water poisoning incident, where an exposed individual developed adult onset epilepsy and died following the epileptic seizure. The hippocampus was the main target of aluminium, where it had accumulated to pathologically significant concentrations. Aluminium-specific fluorescence showed that aluminium was loaded into glial cells, and as well as being associated with deposits of neural cellular debris. The hippocampus is an important target in epilepsy, and our observations of the selective accumulation of aluminium in this region of the brain must raise the possibility that aluminium plays a role in the disease. Links in description, as usual, if you want to read the full articles. Google deletes YouTube video exposing Google's anti-Trump 2020 plot. Tech giant censors exposure by Project Veritas, in which Google X admits bias. Google-owned YouTube deleted a video from their platform after it seemingly exposed a plot by Google to interfere in the 2020 presidential elections. YouTube took down a video from Project Veritas in which an undercover operation secretly filmed an executive from the streaming platform admitting the company has an anti-Trump agenda. In the video, the senior employer at the company, Jenny, appears to boast that YouTube plans to interfere in the next presidential election to stop President Donald Trump winning re-election. No one should be elected. World's poorest president explains why we should kick rich people out of politics. People who like money too much ought to be kicked out of politics, Uruguayan President Jose Mujica told CNN and Espanol in an interview posted online Wednesday. We invented this thing called representative democracy, where we say that majority is who decides. Majority said that in the interview, so it seems to me that we heads of state should live like the majority and not like the minority. Dubbed the world's poorest president in a widely circulated BBC piece from 2012, Mujica reportedly donates 90% of his salary to charity. Mujica example offers a strong contrast to the United States, where in politics the media member of Congress is worth more than $1 million, and corporations have many of the same rights as individuals when it comes to donating political campaigns. The red carpet people who play those things, Mujica said, mimicking a person playing a cornet, all those things are feudal leftovers, and the staff that surround the president are like the old court. I proved that austerity destroys lives, and all government has done is try to discredit me. Last year, I investigated the harsh reality of poverty in the UK. In one of the world's richest countries, I found 40 million people living in poverty, rising infant mortality rates, falling life expectancy for some groups, food banks springing up everywhere, rising homelessness, and overloaded and struggling schools and police services. Most of these problems are the direct result of government policies, by design. But in a response to my final report as UN Special Rapporteur, published last month, the government have refused to take these findings seriously, instead performing a defensive approach that sidesteps all the real issues. This week, the UK and other governments will have the chance to discuss the report directly when I present it to the UN Human Rights Council. The government's response so far has consisted of 3 stages. The first is denial. The report is barely believable, they say. In other words, it's a load of rubbish. A pity then that senior officer of the Department of Work and Pensions subsequently told a House of Commons committee that the report was factually correct, and that in terms of austerity, cuts to local government funding, in terms of the reliance that we have on the labour market and the risk we face in there is a recession, the report made real good points that we have taken on board and we should take on board. The report relies on the government's own data and that of some of the UK's most reputable institutions. These findings should not be controversial, and the government should be addressing them instead of trying to muddy the established facts. The second strategy is distraction. Rather than acknowledge the extent of poverty, inequality, unaffordable housing or hunger, the government pointed to a UN report that supposedly shows the UK is one of the happiest places in the world to live. Aside from the fact that it's not a UN report, but a report that to the UN that actually lists the UK as 5th in the world, acknowledging that many people in the UK are happy and that employment levels are at a record high, does not refute the fact that too many are facing severe hardship. The government claims it has increased the generosity of benefits in recent years. Blatant lies! And takes credit for small tweaks to its own harsh policies. But this is a blatant mischaracterization of decision and massively reduce public spending and systematically erode the value of benefits for those needing support. Third attack, the messenger. The government claimed the report was insufficiently researched based on period of time spent here, but it knows that my team and I spent months preparing for the visit, reviewing countless existing reports, making more than 100 advanced consultations and reviewing more than 300 submissions. And although the report is based on much more than the standard 12-day country visit, I spent that time meeting with people in poverty, prominent researchers and frontline staff at food banks and advice centres, many of whom said they wished the government would do the same. But of course they're a bunch of Satanists, so they're not going to. Now normally I wouldn't put anything like this up. It's a petition, and I wouldn't put it up because obviously if you petition you're actually begging. But in this case it may just be needed. Postpone the rollout of 5G in the UK pending further independent investigation. This is an appeal to postpone the rollout of 5G in the UK pending the outcome of an independent investigation. 5G will increase exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields, RF EMF, and has been proven to be harmful for humans and the environment. It's got 1,725 when I took this snap, and it needs 10,000, so let's get moving, and then if we can get it up to 100,000, that'll be even better. The Times. Corbyn to fail to be PM fears civil service. Concerned Labour leader propped up by advisers. Oxfam staff still offering aid for sex report claims. Daily Fail. Diana's New Dawn. As coroner refuses to point finger at security service failing over atrocity, fury of London Bridge families. And more about Diana, who was, we all know, was murdered by the Secret Service, or the SAS, under the orders of the right degenerate Philip. The Guardian. Families anger as MI5 cleared in terror inquest. See, even they know the MI5 were involved. Fish oil does nothing to boost brain health. Of course, it's in the papers, so don't believe anything, although probably doesn't. Who knows? Dalai graph. Councils make £1 billion in parking charges. Let me just re-say that. £1 billion in theft of motorists. Travellers. I would do it again, says nurse stabbed at giving aid. London Bridge ringleader's family blamed by coroner. GPs failing to spot 2/3 of cancer. Well, it's because I've heard someone said, I went to the doctors the other day and I told him what the problem was, and he looked it up on Google and said, oh, you've got this. And that's what they do now. They don't know what you've got, they just look it up on Google and believe whatever that says. Express. 1 billion parking charges killing off our shops, but the councils don't give a shit because they're rolling in the money. Pruleth, why I love my colourful life. These parking charges by councils have to be stopped. It's just theft. The scum. Exclusive. Archie's Angels. Harry and Meg's 3 nannies in 6 weeks. Can't even look after their own kid. If, of course, it's not their kid really, but beautiful weather. Yeah. Mirror. 93 Fahrenheit. UK set to for hottest day of year. Beer and barbecue food. Salary frenzy. Of course, they'll be banging on the global warming drum again because we've had a couple of days of decent weather. It'll be all global bullshit. Marry where you like. Law change to let couples pick their own dream wedding venue. Heatwave breaks records. Red alert across Europe with France reaching 45.8 degrees. Britain hotter than Cairo, Mumbai and Bangkok. Tens of thousands of elderly and vulnerable at risk of on continent. Glastonbury crowd urged to seek shade and avoid alcohol and trying to protect yourself from the 5G that you'd be all being irradiated with. British public would choose Hunt over Johnson. Not a chance. Wouldn't choose either of them. Rose to suit every garden. My mental struggles. Joe Conte, Janet Street. Why I hate Glastonbury. Because of the 5G. Justin Webb on the Democrats' best hope, and Jumbo waste of paper. Pied love stock. Beer we go. Heatwave booze frenzy. Cheers to the Lioness. As Amanda Newhell. FT. May rebuts Putin at G20 summit and criticises despicable actions. Tusk and Johnson add to chorus decrying Russia's president attack to liberalism. It's more bullshit Skripal crap, which we know was carried out by our own secret service. Trump's Scottish golf course sees off loss of protected status for local dunes. Serco's lines crossed as sleeper nightmare unfold. And almost finally, if we could all just get behind our politicians and push them off a cliff, I'd vote for that. And I think you lot would too. Little things you can do to save the environment. Bike to work. Eat a plant-based diet. Guillotine the corrupt corporate classes that is poisoning the planet for profit. Recycle. Well, I did rather enjoy them last two, and I hope you did too.